Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome back to Cozy Horror with me, Dr. Plague. I think maybe I'm going to start making a habit out of this, sick or not. I think maybe on Mondays or maybe Fridays, I don't know, at some point, maybe like once a week, we'll do like a movie night. We'll just put on a series and I'll let you guys watch something that you haven't in a while. Today, I'm thinking about revisiting a site of many great and wonderful things. A mall. The Kawakala Mall, in fact. Let's take a trip back to a time when things were simpler and life wasn't so difficult. Well, it's always been a little difficult at Kawakala Mall, but we'll get into that. So, sit back, relax, and let's hear about the Indians of Kawakala Mall. I was a security guard at the Kawakala Mall in the early 2000s, back when malls roamed the land like capitalistic buffalo. It wasn't glamorous. I could have made more with the sheriff's office or at the prison the next town over, but it was a 9 to 9, 4 days a week, and the insurance kept me out of the hospital, and the pay kept me out of the poorhouse. The mall insisted on this uniform that made us look like police officers in a kid's cartoon. Blue shirt, black pants, shiny shoes, and a square hat with a plastic badge on it. We weren't armed. They wouldn't even let us carry mace, but it was a mall, so most of the time I was just collaring unruly teens or shoplifters. I'd played football in high school and college, at least until I damaged my left tendon somehow, so I wasn't a small guy. I'd been keeping in shape so my muscles didn't turn to mush, and I was pretty intimidating when I needed to be, even though I looked like an extra from the police academy. The mall was huge, but what always caught my eye, what had caught my eye ever since I was a little kid, was the mural in the food court. Kawakala Mall, or the land it sat on at least, had been an Indian village back before the Civil War. The natives had been victims of westward expansion, and the town had turned them into a tourist attraction years later. All the actual Kawakala Indians, if that was even the name their tribe had been shipped off to reservations near Canada. But that didn't stop the townsfolk from having a festival about their victory over the savage Indians every year. Local legends state that the settlers had adopted the name as a sort of screw you to the natives they had stolen the land from, but they hadn't gotten away scot-free. The tribe had been large, and they had been fighters. Local legend also said they had a spiritual leader who acted as their chief, and he had used something to poison the crops and make the townspeople scared of the woods. Scared or not, the settlers had ambushed them on the spot where the mall stands and killed them to a man. Their women and children had been taken to the reservation. The chief had died here too, falling in the same battle that had devastated his people, and now my town celebrated it every year. If that sounds morbid and a little bit screwed up to you, then you're not alone. The members of the tribe who returned after generations of reservation life usually protested the celebration, but no one seems to pay them much mind. I don't like it, but it's one of our biggest festivals, and I do like funnel cake. Anyway, the mural depicts that battle, but the artist must have had a really sick sense of humor. All the natives in the drawing are smiling like they know a secret that no one else does. There are 10 in all, I counted, and you can see the settlers with their guns as they surround them. The natives have spears and bows, despite the fact that historically they had guns at this point, and they look half crazed as they stare out from the 30-foot-tall mural. I remember having nightmares about those Indians when I was a kid, and they always creeped me out. Now, as an adult, I get to look at them every day from 9 to 9. Neat, huh? Anyway, I tell you all this to let you know about the weird incident that happened that night in 2003. The mall closed at 9 o'clock every day. When I say closed, I mean closed. Doors closed, cages down, no one inside. We didn't even do night security. We don't do overnight stocking, and we do all our janitorial stuff in the early morning. I didn't understand why, but I followed orders. I was always gone before it became a problem anyway. Until tonight. It was a mess. We had 5 teenagers in the mall, all of them drunk as lords, and making problems for everyone. They had started in Dillard's, harassing staff and pushing things over, but then we lost them in one of the service hallways, and we didn't find them again until they popped up in the food court. They blended for a few minutes, right up until they appeared at Wetzel's Pretzels and got irrationally angry because they didn't have any churros done right then. They threw a chair through the display and then moved on before we could catch them, going to KB Toys and causing a scene. That was where we got them, all of them having a massive lightsaber battle in the middle of the store and looking at us like deer caught in headlights when we yelled at them. We had the cops there by that point, but it was still a mess. We all got whacked with lightsabers. One of them puked up Everclear onto me. It's a smell that's hard to forget. And we had to drag 5 half-drunk kids out of the mall and through the food court. The icing on the cake was that all this happened at 7:30, about an hour and a half before closing time. By 8:50, I was still doing paperwork on the incident, and when Jeremy, the closing guard, came to tell me it was time to lock up, I told him I'd do it when I was done, and he could go ahead and go. He looked at me like I was insane. Man, you know as well as I do that we all got to be out of here by 9. That's policy. I know, but if I don't get this done, it's going to be my ass. The cops and the security head want it by tomorrow. Don't worry, Jeremy. I'll lock the place up before I leave. Jeremy looked hesitant, but finally gave in and said he would lock the front door behind him when he left. Just don't be here too late, Jeremy warned. You know how the boss gets. I said I would, and the sound of his keys was the only thing in the quiet mall halls, other than the muzak that seemed to ooze in from the mall proper. Even that was gone after a while. I was left with the infrequent overhead announcements that went off every 10 to 15 minutes, and the soft hum of the air conditioner. I swiped at my eyes as the paperwork came together, my drowsiness getting the better of me as my words swam on the page. I decided that a cup of coffee would be just what I needed to get through this. It was 10 o'clock, way past closing time, and I was starting to feel those 13 hours. Luckily, I was off the next day, so I could rest a bit before my shift on Thursday. As I slipped my quarter into the coffee machine at the end of the security corridor, punching the number for a large and listening to it chug away, I turned my head when I heard something crash out in the mall proper. It was after 10. No one was supposed to be here. Hell, I wasn't supposed to be here. So, there should have been no one here to knock something over. The lights beyond the security hallway were dim, the evening lighting in the mall. And as I came up the hall towards the shadowed area, I heard something soft moving up towards the fountain that lay further up. It wasn't the running feet I was used to hearing. This was not the slap of tennis shoes or the clap of plastic sandals. This sounded more like slippers, something form-fitting. And when I came into the mall, I saw the source of the noise almost immediately. There was a stand nearby, one of those little pop-up stalls that sold jewelry or beepers, and someone had defaced it. This particular one sold hats and sunglasses, the snap brims and the obnoxiously huge reflective glasses that some of the young security guards wore, and there were taxidermy animals attached to it so that they could draw in the crowds they were looking to sell to. Someone had detached the hawk from the top of it, and they had knocked the foot off as well. The foot was still attached with the wire as it hung from the top of the stand, but the stuffed bird was lying on the floor in a less than majestic manner. "Hello?" I called, taking out my mag light and shining it around as I looked for anyone who might still be in the mall. There was nothing other than the hum of the air conditioner and the buzz of the overheads, and the more I thought about it, the sillier I felt for thinking this had been done by someone. The bird had simply fallen when its leg collapsed under it. It was just bad craftsmanship, and I was being jumpy. I went back to get my coffee, taking some careful sips as I went back to my paperwork. I was being a goose, and the quicker I got this done, the quicker I could get out of here. It was nearly done anyway. I was in the home stretch, but the more I tried to concentrate on my description of the events, the more I heard something going on in the mall. It was nothing as dramatic, just little noises, things you could only notice if it was dead quiet. I probably didn't fill everything out the way I should have, but I started rushing a little as my nerves began to fray. The noises were making me jumpy. There shouldn't be any noise in the mall, but I couldn't be sure of that. I had never been here past 9. It wasn't allowed, so who knew what the usual noises were in this place? I ground my teeth together as I made an ink stain on the page and tried to calm down so I didn't ruin all my work. It was a pain to have to do these things in triplicate, but I was about half done and trying to fly through the rest so I could get home. It was 11:30 by the time I finished up, and as I put the correct papers in the correct manila envelopes, I prepared to leave. I could feel the neck hair rising at the thought of going out into the mall. It was dark out there. I'd seen that, and I knew I'd have to go past the fountain, through the dark stores, and then out the food court so I could leave. I shouldn't be scared. I'd done this 100 times in the daytime, but I suddenly understood why they didn't want anyone here past 9 o'clock. The mall felt alien to me as I stepped out of the security hallway, and as I walked towards the food court, I felt my teeth come together in a nervous clack. I turned my head a little as I came past the Abercrombie & Fitch, feeling eyes on me as I went. I turned suddenly as I passed the GameStop, the sound of soft feet thundering not far from me as something stalked me through the tiled halls. My head was snapping from side to side as I walked past the Yankee Candle Company, and that was where I saw one of them. He ducked behind the edge of a bench, but I saw him before he melted into the shadows. He was shirtless, his skin tanned and his hair disappearing down his back. I couldn't see what he had in his hand, but it was easy to imagine a knife or a spear or a bow. It was his eyes that were the worst. His eyes were merry, dancing with pleasure, like an animal that enjoys the chase more than the kill. Those eyes were familiar, too. I'd seen them before, but I couldn't have said where right then. I kept going, pretending I hadn't seen him, but I heard other feet moving to join him. I started walking faster, not sure what was going on here, but I knew I had to get outside so I could use the payphone to call the police. Someone, a group of someones, had gotten into the mall, and they would likely be very interested in stopping me from letting anyone know about it. I could hear them behind me, so there was no going back to the security office. I had to get to the payphone, get out of the mall. I had to do it quickly. As the food court came into view, I broke my rule and started running. I could hear them speeding up too, their soft slippers booming on the tiles as they ran. But even in my haste, I still glanced up at the mural. It was a habit. I couldn't not do it. And that was when I saw it. It almost made me stop, but my fear and adrenaline only made me take it in all the quicker. The natives in the mural were gone, just gone. And as I glanced behind me, I found where they had gone. There were 5 of them behind me now, their faces frozen in those cannibal grins, that the artist had given them. They had knives and spears in hands. One of them was even drawing back a bow, and I realized there would be no escape with them so close behind me. I decided to take a risk, and I turned suddenly and headed for the bathrooms. They skated on the tiles, their hide shoes not getting the purchase they wanted, and I had just enough time to barrel into the maintenance closet and bar the door. I could hear them banging on it, slamming into the metal as they tried to get me. I had engaged the lock and shoved whatever crap I could find against the door, but I wasn't sure it was enough. For the rest of the night, I huddled in the corner and prayed they wouldn't get me. I don't know when I passed out, my body finally stopping, but when the banging started again, it was different than it had been before. "Hello?" came a voice from the outside. "Hello? Is someone in there? You need to come out. I've already called the police, so you'll probably want to be gone before they get here." I recognized that voice. It was Greg from Custodial. I was holed up in the little room where he kept his stuff. He thought I was a burglar. I sat up and opened the door, Greg looking shocked when he saw me. It appeared I had some explaining to do. You know what I miss the most about malls? I think it's the food court. The food was never very good, but so much variety, I swear. You could just get whatever you wanted in there. Anyway, let's move on to part 2. Greg got me a coffee and sat me down in the empty food court. I was shaking, my eyes flying to the mural that had been empty just the night before. Now it was filled once again with the grinning faces of the natives, and their eyes seemed intent on me. I could swear they were moving as I sat and drank coffee slowly, their eyes watching me like they had the night before. It was extremely unsettling, and it took everything I had to keep sitting there as Greg asked me what was happening. "So," Greg said, watching as the other guys gave me and my rumpled security guard uniform a wide berth, "you want to talk about why you were hiding in my broom closet?" I didn't, not really, but I realized I needed to get out in front of this if I wanted everyone to think I was still sane. "Well, Greg, I was chased through the mall last night. Closet made a convenient hiding place." Greg looked a little scared. "Chased? By who? Some customers stay after closing time or something?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I'd stayed to do some paperwork," but Greg looked stricken at this. "You stayed after closing time? You know you can't do that. Jesus, are you okay? Do you need to go to the hospital?" That was a bit of an odd statement. It made me start to wonder what Greg knew. "No, I'm okay. I had to finish up that paperwork. You know, from the incident yesterday." I filled him in on the particulars, Greg still looking like he might shiver out of his socks. And then I got to how I had told Jeremy to go home, that I would finish up, and Greg seemed relieved. I think when I mentioned that Jeremy and I had been involved in the incident, he had wondered if he needed to start looking for 2 people, but the knowledge that I hadn't dragged the kid along seemed to make him feel a little better. Then I described the noises and the people who followed me, and Greg just shook his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Jesus, I can't believe it. You got to talk to the boss. You have to make a report." I started to object, but he put a hand up. "If you don't, I will. This is one of those rules that we do not break. You have to leave at 9 o'clock. You have to. It's policy, and it's for your safety. Why do you think we have to get here at 6 a.m. to clean before we open at 9? No one can be here after dark. No one, or..." He paused, swallowing something before it could come out. "Or someone could get hurt." I'd started to ask him if he knew anything about the mural and the natives that came from it, But someone called my name then, and I turned around to see Mr. Martin, the general manager, coming in with a fresh cup of Dunkin' coffee and a cruller. He asked what I was still doing here, and when Greg said he had found me in a janitor's closet, I was immediately spirited up to the boss's office. He called my boss, the head of security, and told him where he had found me and asked him to come in immediately so we could sort this out. When that was done, he put the phone down and looked at me seriously. I had never actually been in the same room with Mr. Martin. He had hired me in so much as he had signed off on my employment paperwork. Mr. Garvis was my boss, the head of security, and if he was coming in, then maybe I might be able to save my job. Mr. Garvis, Mr. Call Me Phil kid, everyone does, was a nice guy, and he liked me. I wasn't a slouch, I did my paperwork, and I tried to be more than just a glorified rent-a-cop. He had said that if I played my cards right, I might have his job one day. But as Mr. Martin sat across from me, fingers steepled in a decidedly wizard fashion, I started to wonder if I'd still be employed by the end of the day. Let me start by saying that this is extremely irregular. Do you understand that the rules are there for a reason? We don't just tell you to be out of the mall by 9 o'clock because we think it's funny. This is a very real... He weighed his words carefully. There are rules, and we follow them, or we lose our jobs. Now, I talked to Philip, and he says you're one of his best guys. He doesn't want to fire you, so I suppose I just have to make sure of what exactly happened to you. Why don't you tell me what led you to be trapped in the janitor's closet? So I told him a story. It wasn't the truth, but I felt it might be a more coherent story. I told him a group of people had broken in after hours. I told him how they'd been dressed as Native Americans and how they had potentially had keys to the place. I told him how they had run amok and how they had chased me when I went to leave. I told him how I'd been doing paperwork after the events of the night before, and how the police paperwork had been done before I went home because of security protocol. It also had to be done in triplicate, one for Mr. Garvis, one for the police, and one for him, and how that had taken me a while. I told him how I'd heard noises, how I'd gone to investigate, and how when I went to leave, I'd been chased. I hid in the closet. They had tried to get into the closet, and when they couldn't, they had left. I'd stayed there, fearing they were waiting for me to leave so they could jump me, and I must have passed out. Mr. Martin thought about this as he drank his coffee, his eyes seeming to judge whether I was holding anything back. That was all you saw, right? He finally asked. Yes, sir, I said. I hid because I didn't want to be killed. I didn't know what their intentions were, but they seemed pretty angry. He nodded, getting up so he could look out the window in his office that overlooked the food court. The custodians were just getting started down there, cleaning and tidying and taking out the trash, and Mr. Martin seemed to watch them for an eternity. You know, you aren't the first person to tell me about strangers in the mall. I didn't say anything. He didn't seem to want an answer. We used to be open till 11. We used to keep the movie theater open till 2 a.m. When the mall first opened, you could damn near shop till midnight. But that was when the weird things started happening. People started going missing. People started getting hurt. This area gets rough after dark, son. We got worried about the staff, about the guests. We started closing down at 9. Now, no one stays past 9. No one. Oh, sure, the Cineplex complains about losing revenue, and
The stores complain about having to herd everyone out by 8:30, but the problem stopped. You've been here a while, haven't you? 2 years, sir, I said, still only speaking when spoken to. I learned early in life how to take an ass chewing, with the least amount of teeth marks. Did anyone ever tell you about Jim Morris? No, sir. Not surprising, Mr. Martin said, still looking out over his kingdom. Jim Morris was the old head of security here, back when the mall opened in '82. He'd been a cop for 20 years, retired from the force, but his wife got cancer, and his retirement got cut short. When people started getting hurt, Jim blamed the protesters. Protesters, sir? I asked, not sure what he meant. The groups of Native American activists never usually make it off Main Street these days, and it was rare to see them at the mall unless it was to buy clothes or glower at the mural. Surely you remember when the mall was opened, he said, glancing at me before turning back to the window. Or maybe you don't. The same sort of protesters who tote signs during the festival and the Down Home Days celebration started out here. They said this was tribal land and we had no right to it. They claimed this was the site of a major tragedy for the tribes and that we should take our mall elsewhere. Anyway, Jim thought it was them. All the witnesses said it was guys in buckskin with feathers in their hair, and Jim wanted them brought to justice. After they killed the third person, I didn't have a lot of choice but to cut back the operation hours of the mall. People were scared. Scared people just want things to go back to normal. Not Jim, though. They had hurt people, killed people on his watch, and Jim was mad as hell about it. What happened to him? I asked, unable to stop myself. He stuck around after closing. He said he wanted to watch cameras and catch the bastards in the act. I begged him not to. The police were already doing regular patrols, but he insisted. He stayed, and the next day they found him dead. Mr. Martin pointed to the fountain down in the food court. He was in that fountain, his gun shot empty, and his throat cut like an animal. I never let anyone stay past 9 again. Strangely enough, that stopped it. I don't know why. I don't care why. People are told to head for the food court at 8:30, and by 9, the doors are closed. End of story. Phil likes you. I like you. But if this happens again, I'll fire you myself. Am I understood? That was about the time Mr. Garvis came in, saying he'd gotten here as fast as he could, and Mr. Martin told me I was free to go after I said I understood. And I did. I understood that something was happening, maybe something Mr. Martin understood more about than he cared to say, and that it was something dangerous. Mr. Garvis said to come with him, and we had a similar conversation in his office. Mr. Garvis praised my desire to finish up my business, praised my immaculate paperwork, but told me in no uncertain terms that this could not happen again. You're a good kid. You have a bright future in this mall. I don't want to see you throw it all away over something like this. If this happens again, just take the paperwork home and do it. I'll collect it the next day. No problem. Again, I commend your desire to get everything in on time, but you have to be smart while you do it. Are you on the schedule today? No, sir. Today's my off day. Good. Go get some rest. Just be safe in the future. Neither Mr. Martin nor I think you need a write-up for this. So don't worry about any of that. Get some rest. And thank you for trying to keep the mall safe. As I was leaving, Greg stopped me. Hey, you forgot your coffee, he said. I put a little something in there for you, but maybe wait till you get to your car to take a sip. Be safe, kid. The cup was suspiciously light, and when I got in my car and took the lid off, I found a note inside. come to Mel's tonight at 7. I want to know what you saw and talk a little more about it.
Sure would be nice to go back and see a mall again, you know? Go to a Hot Topic or maybe a Spencer's. But they're getting to be so difficult to find. I guess those halcyon days of capitalism really have gone somewhere else. Anyway, let's move on to Chapter 3.
I pulled up outside of Mel's that afternoon, full of questions. I hadn't slept a lot that day, but I'd get some rest that night after I got my answers. I could see Greg's little car was parked in a lot out front, so I figured he had been there for a little while. He had to clean the mall tomorrow morning, so he probably wouldn't be here late. If I was going to get answers to my questions, then I would need to be quick about it. Greg was sitting on a stool near the back of the bar, and he had someone else with him, someone I didn't know. The guy sitting beside him had long, dark hair and a tanned complexion. I stopped for a moment when I saw him because it looked like someone had taken one of the natives off the mural. He wasn't grinning, however. In fact, this fellow was stone-faced as he listened to Greg talk. The two looked up as I came in, and Greg smiled as he waved me over. "There you are. Weren't sure we'd see you. This is Terry. He's the tribal representative for Kawakala." "I really wish they would change that name," Terry said with a roll of his eyes. "It's not even like it means anything. It's just something vaguely native they slapped together." Terry is also one of the chairmen for the protests that are going on during events he finds to be unseemly. "So, most of them," I interjected, and that got just the slimmest hint of a smile. "Most of them," he agreed. "I asked him here so he might be able to shed some light on the situation that you may or may not have been witness to." Terry extended a hand, and I shook it with only minor trepidation. "So, why don't you enlighten us and tell us what exactly it was you saw?" I started out telling them the story that I had told my boss. Some people had broken in, they had chased me out, and it had all been very scary, and I had hidden in the maintenance closet. When I was done, the two of them looked at each other, and it was pretty clear they didn't believe a word of it. "Okay," Greg said before he took a sip of his drink. "Now, why don't you tell us what really happened?" I sighed. "Okay, so I told them what I had experienced again, but this time I told them about the mural and how the images had gone away when the natives had chased me into the closet. It was weird," I told him, as the bartender brought over another drink for me. "I didn't realize what they were until it was almost too late. I just thought I was hearing mall sounds that I wasn't used to. When I started seeing shadows, I almost dismissed it as my imagination." "It's a good thing you didn't," Greg said. "Otherwise, you'd be just another statistic." How many people has the mall claimed?" I asked, taking a sip of my PBR. 15 in all," Greg said, "though most of them were before the 9 o'clock curfew. The mall claimed 9 guests, 4 maintenance men, 2 security guards. You've heard about the security head they found in the fountain, I suppose?" "Not until today," I said. "Mr. Martin told me about it, though I think he meant for it to be cautionary." Terry laughed, and it caught me by surprise. I'd almost forgotten he was there. "Of course he would. That old crow's been squatting on that carrion pile for a long time. He picked the land up at an auction for next to nothing, and then put that multi-million-dollar monstrosity on top of the graves beneath it. Terry's family should have owned that land, but they were displaced, you see, and the government took it. They stole it," Terry shouted, drawing some attention from the bar. "They stole it from us just like everything else. It should have been given to us when we left the reservation, but instead they sold it to that trickster. We used to protest outside the mall, but Then they trespassed us from the grounds, and now we can't come within 100 feet of it. We wanted that land so we could set up housing for our displaced people. Instead, they threw up that monument to opulence. It makes me sick. Terry has been trying to petition for the return of their land ever since they built that mall. Martin says he's willing to sell it to the tribe, but he's asking way too much for it. The tribe can't get that sort of money together, and he knows it. So he gets to look sorrowful and philanthropic while still making a pile of money. If you hate him so much, why do you work for him? I asked. And Greg shrugged. Because, like you, I also have bills to pay. Terry called for another, and I started to notice a small collection of glasses in front of him. He and Greg had clearly been here for a while. The man's face was beginning to darken with color, and it was pretty clear that the conversation and the alcohol weren't mixing well. He's a snake in the grass. He knew he could get rid of us because he spends a lot of money in Kawakala and has friends on the council. That's why I don't blame Cleary for what he did. It's a fitting punishment for what that snake did to us. He looked up guiltily then and turned back to his cup as if he had said something that he shouldn't have. Who's Cleary? I asked, looking back at Greg. Greg shot Terry a look like he needed to watch his mouth. Cleary was a local artist. His family went and hid in the hills with some of the other families when the people came to take them to the reservation, and he's part of the earliest group of protesters. He drew beautifully, and when the mall started coming under fire, he was hired to paint the mural in the food court. You're kidding me, I said. I assumed that was some kind of joke or something. They made all the natives look like savages. Terry looked like he was getting mad, but I blundered ahead. No disrespect, but you know what I mean. They all have these big, creepy grins, and they kind of look like cannibals in an old novel. That thing, it used to give me nightmares as a kid. It was supposed to, Terry insisted. It was supposed to make you scared. These were the proud warriors that stood against the westward expansionists, and now they look out over the fruits of his labor. He spat into his beer bottle. Mr. Martin hired Cleary because he thought it would help smooth things over with the local tribes. If one of their own was making art in the mall, then it might show a little solidarity. But Cleary had other ideas. But that wasn't all of it, Terry cut in. Cleary was someone who believed in the old ways, the ways of our ancestors, the ways they used to keep the settlers from feeling comfortable. He grunted as Greg kicked him under the bar, and I sighed as I decided I'd had enough of this pussyfooting. If they had invited me out here to tell me old stories, then I was ready to get this over with. Why did you invite me out here? Clearly it isn't just to hear my story, so why did you need me here? The two of them looked at each other, and I could almost feel the silent conversation between them. There's a problem, and we wanted to know what you knew before we brought it up, Greg said. You would have thought we were crazy if we started talking about murals and spirits, if you thought a bunch of kids broke in for some vandalism. We need you to understand what you could be getting into if you help us. Like, really understand. I nodded. Okay. If it helps establish the safety of the mall, then I'm always willing to help. Greg nodded, looked at Terry, who seemed to have suddenly lost his voice, and continued. The protesters are not content to limit their protesting to the town square. They've been trespassed from the mall, but they've always seen it as an insult to their people. Some of the younger protesters have been talking about breaking away from the pack so they can vandalize the mall. They want to get in after dark so they can damage buildings and disrupt trade. They think it'll push Martin to sell the land when his ventures begin to fall apart. I nodded a bit. So The spirits won't hurt them, will they? Terry looked up, some of the anger leaking out of him. The spirits in the mall aren't worried about who's in there and who isn't. They simply come out and menace those inside. We don't know why it's only at night. Neither did Cleary, but if they break into the mall, the spirits will hurt them too. We've tried to talk them out of this, but they're set on their course. They won't even tell us when they plan to do it. That's why we need your help. Why me? I asked. Why not go to Phil or the police? Craig scoffed. The police just think we're trying to stir up trouble, or even more infuriating, that we're prank callers. Phil doesn't think it's an issue and doesn't seem to be taking me very seriously. I'd talked to Mr. Martin, but we suspect he would act in a similar manner. These are our young people. We need to protect them. If you talk to Phil, he might take it seriously. He likes you. He respects you. And he might manage to do something if you can convince him to talk to the police. Maybe they'll take it seriously, too. I sat back, feeling the condensation slide down the bottle in my hand. How had I gotten mixed up in all this? It seemed like my spontaneous decision to stay till my paperwork was done and let me glimpse something that I would have been better off not knowing. And now I was stuck between helping and ignoring a threat to my job. I had agreed to protect them all, after all. And if this was real, then, well, it was a substantial threat. You know, if they catch them in the mall, the cops are going to arrest them, I said, trying one more attempt to weasel out. Terry looked stricken, but Greg only shrugged. Better jail than dead. If the spirits catch them in there, then they'll do more than lock them up. My nephew, Terry's son, is one of those kids talking about breaking in. I'd be real sad to have to bail him out, but I'd be even sadder to have to attend his funeral. You've seen them. You know what they're capable of. We just want you to talk to Phil about it. Maybe bring it up to Mr. Martin. After that, we can... But the bar door slammed open then, and someone came frantically inside. The bartender asked him where the fire was, but when he saw Terry, he made a beeline for him. The two had a quiet conversation, Terry getting a little louder as it went on. And when he spoke to Greg, the older man looked stricken. Looks like we might be out of time. Come on, we might need your help. What's going on? I asked, getting up despite my misgivings. They aren't waiting anymore, it seems. They're heading to Kawakala Mall right now.
You ever just wander around at JCPenney and look at stuff? They had everything. You could buy a couch, a TV, Dockers, video games, damn near anything you wanted in there. How the hell does something like that fail? Boggles the mind. I'm rambling again. Let's go on to part 4.
They opted to take my car, since it would be quicker. I'd gone from having a beer in a dive bar to flying down the road at about 65. I'd never been farther from feeling drunk in my life, and the realization that I was about to head back into the hornet's nest was a sobering one. I pulled out my bag phone, the one I kept in my car for emergencies, and started trying to remember the numbers to important people. First came the police, but they were less helpful than expected. Kawakala Sheriff's Department, how can I help you? Yes, hi. I'm a security guard at the Kawakala Mall. There's a large group of people trying to break in. I need some officers to... But she cut me off. Wow, that's a new one. You're like the 4th one that's called in the last 20 minutes. The joke's wearing thin, kid. I stared at the handset as she hung up on me, shaking my head a little. I suppose I hadn't been the only person to call. Maybe some of the other tribal members had called to see if they could nip this one in the bud before it took root. Okay, the police weren't going to help. I needed to move on to my next resource. My hand shook as I dialed Phil's number. Phil would believe me. He had to. and as it rang and rang, I began to wonder if I'd caught him at a bad time. Maybe he already knew. Surely the mall didn't have a security system. The spirits would set it off, wouldn't they? I realized I knew very little about this situation, and that it might be handled even now. If they'd set off the security system, then the protesters could have scattered already. This could be over before it started. Maybe Phil was on the phone with the alarm company. When he picked up on the 6th ring, I wasn't sure whether I was relieved or not. Who the hell is calling at 10 o'clock at night? I got work in the morning, so this better be important. Mr. Garvis, get to the mall as quick as you can. Something's going on. Kid, what the hell are you doing calling me so? Sir, I need you to get to the mall. Protesters are breaking in and are going to get themselves hurt. I could hear him breathing heavily as he weighed what I was saying. And then he started to chuckle a little. Oh, that. Yeah, Greg told me about that. It's just hearsay, kid. Nothing to worry about. Get some rest. We need you back at it tomorrow. They're breaking in right now, sir. I'm watching them do it. We both know that the vandalism isn't the worst part of this situation, and that 10 or so dead kids from the local tribe is going to look really bad on the news. The police seem to think I'm joking. I need help before these kids get hurt. Call Mr. Martin. Call the sheriff. Call the National Guard if you need to. But these kids are going to die if whatever it is that's in there gets a hold of them. That shut him up pretty quickly. I thought you didn't see anything last night. I lied. I didn't want to sound crazy when I started talking about Indians chasing me. Please, help me out here. I turned the wheel a little harder than I meant to, my car squealing as it took the curve on 2 wheels, and it took Mr. Garvis less than 10 seconds to make his decision. Don't go inside, and stop as many people as you can from going inside. I'll be on my way. Where's the break-in? I looked in the back seat, and Terry mouthed, food court. The food court. Gotcha. Sit tight. I'll have help there soon. Then he hung up, and I was left with nothing but me, Terry, Greg, and a big mess that we were on the way to. He's not going to make it in time, Terry half whispered. Hell, we might not even make it in time. We have to try, I said, slowing down a little as we came into the home stretch. I didn't want to get pulled over by a cop who was only doing his job and have to explain why I was doing 65 in a 45-mile zone. Kid, Greg said, and it sounded like he'd been choosing his words for a while, you don't have to come in with us. Terry and I have skin in the game, but you don't have to throw yourself into the mix. If you want to wait for the cavalry to come, I understand, but I've got to try to help them, even if it gets me arrested when the police arrive. It's a little late for that, I said, cursing under my breath as I missed my turn and had to pull a Yui in the middle of the road. I'm in this now, like it or not, so you might as well get used to the idea. We drove in silence for a moment, me watching for cops as I goosed it up a little bit. What makes the spirits come to the mall anyway? I asked suddenly, glancing back at Terry. Is it because it's a burial ground or something? Terry blew out a breath. It is, and it isn't. There's been a lot of bad energy around this site for a while. Hikers used to go missing in the area. Kids out looking for a place to smooch would get the bejesus scared out of them. People out for a late-night drive would say they saw spectral figures, but really it was Cleary that materialized them. He used some kind of old ritual, something he'd had from generations ago, and he brought the spirits in the painting to life. He intended for people to die. He meant for people to get hurt, and he got his wish. How do we stop it then? I asked, seeing the mall coming into sight. We have to find the totem he used to... Terry thought about how to put it and finally just shrugged. Hold it all together, I suppose. How does it work? Maybe if I can find it, I can stop it before too many people get hurt. Totem could be anything. But it'll be close to the mural. The totem's like a conduit. It helps make a connection between the earth, the spirits, and the medium, the mural. You'll need to interrupt that connection, and it should stop them from coming back. If we knew what it was, then we'd have gone in and done it by now." "Speak for yourself," Terry said, but flinched back as Greg fixed him with a withering look. "Mark is about to go face to face with our past, Terry. Are you saying you wouldn't have stopped that if you could?" Terry didn't say anything, but the message was pretty clear. I thought about it as we drove. "So, it definitely has to be close to the mural, right?" "Correct," Greg said, as we pulled around the Dillards and headed for the food court. The only thing near the mural was the food court and Mr. Martin's office. Mr. Martin had his office at the top of the mural, technically. If something like that was going to be somewhere, I supposed Mr. Martin's office was a good place to start. I had been all over the mall, and I hadn't seen anything like that anywhere. I started to ask, not really sure I wanted an answer. Could it be inside the mural? Like in the wall somewhere? "Could be," Greg said, "but I doubt it would be. The wall is thick, and the food court was one of the first places they built when the construction started. Unless Cleary was long gaming, I can't see it being in the wall." "He did give him that urn when he was done," Terry suddenly put in, and we both looked back at him like we'd forgotten he was there. "What urn?" Greg asked, craning back so we could look at him. "When he finished the mural, he handed Mr. Martin an urn, a hand-baked urn that his daughter or niece or something had made. He said he hoped it could be a bridge for healing between his people and the people of the town. But I remember that smile he gave when he gave it to him. It's a bridge, all right, but not for healing. I bet you anything that's what you're looking for." "What do you think the odds are that he kept it in his office?" I asked as we rounded the corner and saw the doors to the food court. I never got my answer. The scene we wandered up on was pretty awful, and as I put it in park, we snapped to a halt, all of us just staring at it for a while. They'd pried the doors open with a crowbar, and then they had likely poured in and gotten to helling. The ones coming out now, however, didn't look like they had helling on their minds. They were cut, some of them bleeding freely, and they were scattered in a mass of jeans and t-shirts. We got out, a tire half on the sidewalk, and Greg reached out for one of them as he came running past. The kid couldn't be older than 17, and he had a cut on his cheek that was going to make a hell of a scar. Luckily, it appeared he was going to get to keep the eye, though. "Nathan," Greg said, shaking the boy a little until he turned to look at him. "What happened?" "I don't know, Uncle. We got in, and then we started breaking things. We were laughing and joking, and then all of a sudden, we were under attack. They looked like warriors, all deerskin and painted faces, and they just hit us. Some of us ran, some of us tried to fight, and some of us are dead. I ran. They felt wrong, Unc. They felt like they were made of bees." Poor kid was shaking all over. Greg let him go so he could run away. "Last chance to bail out, kid," Greg said, but I was already heading for the door. I'd come too far to turn back now.
I won't ramble on too much about malls and such. I know you want to get to the conclusion. So, here we go. Part 5.
I stepped over the broken glass and was glad that I'd worn my work shoes. The glass broke loudly underfoot, and I had intended to reach back to help Greg and Terry before I caught sight of the interior. The spirits hadn't gotten to them quickly enough, it would seem, because the food court was a mess of broken glass and spilled garbage. I heard Greg whistle behind me, and I was guessing this was the worst mess he had seen in the food court. The smell was tremendous. Whatever prep had been done for the next day was now all over the floor, and mingling smells made me want to throw up. It was slippery, my shoes sliding in the muck, as we tried to make our way into the mall, and Terry had to reach out and grab a post before he fell on his butt. If you've never smelled something like this, it's kind of like a dumpster full of old food left in the sun. It was made all the worse by the lingering smell of copper that permeated it, too. The sauce and the liquid ran together with the blood that was leaking from many of the protesters. Not all of them were dead, but quite a few of them were. They were laid out on tables and leaning against walls, but some of them were stiller than living people should be. Terry gasped as he tried to go to a few of them, but he had to grab the post as he slipped in the mess. The floor was like a miasma of broken furniture, so one false move would send him stumbling into a soy sauce punji pit. "Go on," Greg said. "We'll try to get help. If you find Marcus, tell him to come back to the food court. We'll get the others out of here once we clear a path." I nodded, making my way carefully across the food court as I heard them make their way to the custodian office to get some tools. It was like navigating an oil slick. I could feel my feet sliding, threatening to come out from under me, and the farther in I went, the more screaming I could hear. Someone was being attacked or murdered, and the sooner I found the totem that was anchoring the painting to the mall, the sooner I could stop all of this. The people on the floor had long slashes on them, jagged cuts that oozed like something living. As I grabbed one of the tables so I didn't bust my ass, I saw one of them creeping up on me. The mess on the floor didn't seem to slow him down, and his grin was highly predatory. He had a knife in one hand, his arms and chest bare and slashed with blood that I doubted was his own, and his feet came down quietly on the messy floor. My breath hitched a little as I watched him creep closer, my doom creeping along with him. My feet slid as I tried to get out of his line of sight. The spirit just kept coming with that horror movie slowness, and I wanted to scream as I fumbled around. I was going to die. This thing was going to kill me, and it felt like a colossal waste to have come this far to lose to a grease trap or a turned-over container of sauce. He was less than 20 feet away from me when I heard the water, and as it came frothing from behind the Chick-fil-A, I could see that someone had smashed the nozzle of a drop sink. The water became a stream and then a small river, and as it pushed the muck away, I could also see the spirit pause and take a step back. His smile was still in place, but now he seemed hesitant to cross the stream. "Go!" yelled Greg, and I could see a bloody kid leaning against his shoulder. "Spirits can't cross running water. Hurry up before he regroups." My footing was still extremely tenuous, but I managed to get moving as the water carved a path between us. The office wasn't far, but I could see other shadows stalking me as I went. They were hurting me, moving me like a deer into a trap, and as the office door came into sight, I could see them getting ready to spring. There were 5 of them, their faces mostly hidden by shadow, and I could see only a slim chance of making it into the office. My shoes weren't completely dry, and it saved my life. As I scrambled for the door, my shoe slipped on the tile, and I went down on my chest as they made their move. Somehow they moved right over the top of me. It was weird, feeling them come within a hair's breadth of stabbing me to death, and as a pair of them crashed into a couple of tables, I reached for the door and threw it open. It came back together very quickly as I put my weight against it, and I started looking for something to jam under it. The 2 that jumped over me must have got back on their feet pretty quickly, because suddenly it was like a machine gun was hitting the outside of the door. I engaged the lock, but that wasn't going to last forever. Finally, I found a rickety-looking chair at the bottom of the stairs and slammed it up under the knob. It was like putting silly putty in a hole on a dam, but it was all I had. As the door bucked and thrashed, I took the stairs 2 at a time. I needed to get this totem and destroy it before the spirits got through. and put those barbaric knives to good use on my flesh. To my surprise, the office at the top of the stairs was open, and I went straight in and locked the door behind me. To my continued surprise, someone was standing at the window and looking down at the carnage. It was Mr. Martin, and he turned around with a look that said he believed his life was about to end. "What are you doing here?" he asked, stepping away from the window. "Me? What are you doing here?" I shot back. "Young man, this is my office. I'm allowed to be here." "No, actually you aren't. Don't you remember? You told me that no one was allowed to be here after 9 p.m. I believe you said you would fire me if you caught me here past 9 o'clock again. So I'll reiterate. What are you doing here?" Mr. Martin looked like he wanted to get mad, looked like he wanted to blister at me on the spot, but he seemed to remember that we were standing over a powder keg and adjusted his tone accordingly. "I was doing paperwork, much like you were the other night, and told security they could go on home and that I would lock up at 9. When I went to lock up at 9 o'clock, I saw this group of hellions out in the parking lot and decided it might be safer to hide from the natives than fight the mob. So I locked the door and ran, hiding in my office. I assumed they would wreck up the place and then probably get killed by the spirits, but then you had to barge in and ruin my hiding place." I was speechless. "Did it not occur to you to call the police?" Mr. Martin smiled, but it was extremely patronizing. "Oh, of course not. Why would that have occurred to me? Of course I tried to call the police. It seems that whatever these young men were planning, their council of elders tried to call the police and nip it in the bud already. However, the cops didn't take it seriously, and when I told them about the group of children trying to get into my mall, they laughed at me and hung up." I nodded. "That's what they did to me, too. So you've been hiding up here?" Mr. Martin sneered at me. "I'm not hiding. I was being smart. It appeared you had the same idea." I was already looking around as he spoke, trying to find the totem or whatever it was I was looking for. "No, I'm actually looking for something." Mr. Martin looked up slowly. "In my office?" I sighed. I'd have to tell him. "Look, I've got some information that might stop the natives from coming back again. We have to break something that's connecting the artist's intention to the art piece. And it's something he gave you when the piece was completed." I elaborated a little, trying to make it as quick as I could, and as I laid it all out, I became aware that the thumping at the base of the stairs had stopped. That could mean they had given up, but it could also mean that they'd broken through my small barricade and were creeping up the stairs to find their quarry. I turned suddenly and locked the door, before turning back to find Mr. Martin smirking, but not at the story, to my surprise. He honestly seemed to be taking it all quite well, and I thought he might believe a lot of what I was saying. "So, we need to find this totem that Cleary gave me when he finished the art piece and smash it. That's what they tell me. I don't know how, but it will supposedly sever the connection and stop the natives from coming back again." Mr. Martin nodded and started opening drawers on his desk. "I keep it in here. Always kind of meant to make a display out of it or something. I know it's here somewhere. I just need to..." The door rattled in the frame as something hit it hard enough to send dust motes falling from the ceiling tiles. I started looking for things to push against the door as it jounced again. In the end, when the filing cabinet wouldn't budge and the end table was too flimsy, I put my back against the door and did my best to hold them at bay. It felt like a small army was pressing against the metal, and I could see the frame bulging as they set their shoulders to the task. "Hurry!" I shouted. wincing as something poked through the door and pricked me. Mr. Martin was yanking the drawers out now, spilling papers and pens all over the floor. A calculator went flying, as did a bunch of paper clips. And suddenly, he was out of drawers and looking pale. I was sure I put it in the desk, he breathed, looking under it like it might have fallen down. I couldn't have told you why until right now, but it always seemed important, like something I should keep close. He crawled out from under the front of the desk, and his hair was sticking up in frantic corkscrews. The door wasn't going to last much longer at this rate, and I winced again as more than a poke hit me in the back. They were cutting through the wood now, those stone tools feeling very real as they came closer and closer to poking into me. And when I saw Mr. Martin staring at the shelf beside the filing cabinet, I hoped he had found what he was looking for. "It's here!" he half shouted, half squeaked, and lunged for it as he spilled over the bottom two shelves. I saw him lift up a lumpy earthen pot about the size of a baseball, and then he brought it down with a note of finality as it shattered against the short carpet. He stomped on it for good measure, and as it broke and scattered, I felt a sudden and immediate halt to the force that was trying to push its way into the room. I leaned against the door a little longer, not trusting it, but it was like the ghosts had been exorcised from the place. The air was lighter, the room less constricting, and as I eased off the door and peeked at the gap around the ill-fitting thing, I couldn't see anything lurking in the shadows. Kawakala Mall was just a mall now, and it was nice to be alone inside it. Mr. Martin collapsed on the floor of his office, breathing heavily and staring at the ceiling. And that was where Phil found both of us, a half hour later. It felt like no time to either of us, but apparently we had just been listing there in the aftermath. He got us downstairs again so the EMS could have a look at us. And then the shitstorm truly began. The aftermath of the Kawakala Mall break-in was pretty wild. 8 kids had died that night, but Marcus wasn't one of them. He had pulled a couple of his friends into a walk-in cooler at the Chinese place and barred the door, but the rest hadn't been so lucky. Even those who had escaped had some pretty substantial injuries. They tried to sue, I heard, but they had broken in and vandalized the mall, so it didn't go real well for them. Kawakala Mall rebranded itself as Pine Meadows Mall, and Mr. Martin had a long talk with Greg and Terry about what had happened with the mural. They decided to be a little more open to community outreach, and the survivors were allowed to help clean the mall as opposed to going to jail. Mr. Martin also started a few charities with the local tribes and talked to the city council about rebranding some of their town traditions. The protests have lessened, and the general air of chaos has gone down quite a bit. Now the mall stays open late. People come in to shop, the movie theater runs all-night screenings sometimes, and Pine Meadows Mall is a community staple. At least it was until 2020 when everything kind of shut down due to COVID. The mall is bouncing back, but it's not as big or as full as it used to be. I was head of the mall security until COVID, and now I'm retired. I still go to Pine Meadows sometimes, but I still can't look at that mural without getting a shiver. The mall may be changed, but I still remember when the natives were restless and their hunting went on all night. So if you come to Pine Meadows Mall, formerly Kawakala Mall, remember to be respectful. Who knows what other spirits might be waiting to take their turn.
And just like that, our stories are over for another day. But don't worry, I'm sure we'll be back again very soon with more cozy horror. Until then, this is Dr. Plague wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.